Of all the festivals in the ancient Celtic calendar, Samhain celebrates the end of the harvest and also ushers in the beginning of winter. This is one of the oldest known pagan holidays, dating back more than 2,000 years. It falls on the night of October 31st to November 1st and is incredibly pivotal within Celtic mythology and spirituality. But beyond its seasonal importance, the liminal point of Samhain existed between the worlds of the living and the dead, where the boundaries blur and spirits can more easily communicate with the human realm. The origins of Samhain. Samhain is a Gaelic word from Old Irish meaning summer's end, and was the third and final harvest of the year. Importantly, this was an important time in Ireland because the agricultural year had ended, and it was time to begin preparing for the cold, hard winter ahead. Many communities gathered food and livestock for the winter months. The fields were dormant until they would be sown again the next spring. Samhain was also held to be the Celtic New Year, at which time the cyclical aspect of life and death was the pivot of cultural and spiritual observances. According to Celtic belief, at Samhain, the veil separating the world of the living from that of the spirits became thin. This allowed the dead to walk among the living, and one would often offer them food and drink to appease their ancestors and other wandering spirits. These spirits did not always mean harm. Some were said to watch over one or guide them, while others would cause harm if their appeasement was not properly offered. Connection with the Celtic Wheel of the Year. The Wheel of the Year is a construct representing the cyclical nature of time in most pagan traditions, especially within the sphere of Wicca and other modern neo-pagan movements. The wheel consists of 8 sabbats or festivals, which correlate with a specific time in either the agricultural or solar year. Samhain is one of the 4 greater sabbats and holds a very special place within this cycle. While the agriculturally based festivals of Samhain, Imbolc, Beltane, and Lugnasad constitute the greater sabbats, which are tied directly to the rhythms of planting, growth, and harvest. The solar-based sabbats mark the solstices and equinoxes. Samhain is a time of endings and a time of beginnings. Because this was the last festival in the year for the Celts, symbolically, it represented death, but at the same time ushered in new life as the winter season prepared the earth in its rebirth during spring. The concept of death and rebirth, symbolically cycling in a circle, is at the core of the spiritual ideas of the Celts and the later neo-pagan beliefs. As such, concerning the Wheel of the Year, Samhain is indeed diametrically opposed to Beltane in early May, which is about life, fertility, and growth. While at Beltane the height of fertility and the light half of the year is reached, Samhain symbolizes entry into the dark half when nature slumbers and life retreats into the shadows. This sets up a necessary balance of light and dark, life and death, fertility and decay, which is crucial for understanding where Samhain fits into the greater cycle of the year. The role of ancestors and the dead in Samhain traditions. Ancestor veneration was at the heart of the festival of Samhain. The ancestors were not considered truly dead by the Celtic people, but were continuing to live, always present in one's life to guide and watch over both family and home. Samhain was a time when the living could reconnect with the dead, honor them, and learn from them. A place was put at the dinner table for family relatives who had died, leaving out food and drink offerings. In this manner, a dumb supper, the people of the earth gave respect to those that had passed away and created a bridge between the worlds. Lighting bonfires was an essential element in the Samhain festival. Communities lit huge fires on hillsides to ward off spirits and offered some protection during the cold, dark months. Cattle and other livestock were often passed between 2 great bonfires as a purifying ritual to ready them before they came into the shelter for the winter. Bonfires also represented the sun, therefore heating and lighting for these early days of winter that were steadily growing both darker and colder. The ashes from the bonfire would be spread on all fields to bless their crops in advance of next year's harvest. These fires served the dual purpose of either guiding spirits further on into the afterlife or back to the world of the living. It was believed that without such lights, lost spirits would cause chaos and an imbalance between the realms. The custom of candle or lantern lighting to guide souls home survived for many centuries, and later influenced the Halloween custom with a jack-o'-lantern into Halloween. Samhain was turned into Halloween with the spread of Christianity during the early Middle Ages. As the Christian faith expanded throughout the British Isles, it absorbed much of the pagan festivals and customs and molded them in the manner of Christianity. Pope Gregory III actually changed the feast of All Saints' Day to November 1st in an effort to replace the pagan festival of Samhain. All Souls' Day, to be celebrated on November 2nd, was to honor the faithful dead and to keep the living praying for their souls. Even so, the pagan traditions of Samhain held fast in the cultural traditions of the region. By the 19th century, Irish and Scottish immigrants came to America, bringing with them the traditions now melded with native customs and evolving into what is known today as Halloween. This eventually evolved into souling, where children went around door to door begging for food in return for offering prayers for the dead. This later morphed into the modern practice of trick-or-treating. The use of hollowed-out turnips and gourds as lanterns became the familiar pumpkin jack-o'-lanterns, symbols synonymous with Halloween. Costumes also, which were worn on Samhain to disguise oneself from malevolent spirits, survived and took center stage in Halloween festivals. Masks and costumes were worn at times during Samhain to confuse the spirits who wandered around so they would not be able to bring about any harm to people. This has evolved over time into wearing costumes as a huge component of fun and mischief associated with Halloween, but its roots in spiritual protection are clear. The spiritual significance of Samhain in modern times. While Halloween has long been valued and practiced in a commercial manner, with an emphasis on dressing up in costumes and trick-or-treating for candy, Samhain remains important as a religious and spiritual observance among many contemporary pagans, most especially those who are adhering to the doctrines of Wicca or any of its other forms, collectively referred to as neo-paganism. Samhain is celebrated as a time for spiritual reflection, ancestor worship, and life and death honored. Many contemporary practitioners hold rituals to communicate with ancestors, practice divination, or perform rites for protection and balance in the dark half of the year. For Wiccans, Samhain marks the beginning of the new year on the wheel of the year. This really is the most important of all Sabbats, a time of magic and spiritual energy at its peak. Divination is also done during this time, when the veil between the worlds is at its thinnest, using various methods like scrying, tarot, or rune casting in attempts to glean some insight into the future. Others may perform rituals of honor for the dead by setting altars to the ancestors, while some may hold quiet meditative sessions linking up with their spiritual guides. Samhain also brings about a very introspective time. As nature is slowing down and preparing for winter, many use the festival as a time to go inside themselves and reflect on the past year. It is now a time to let go of patterns, relationships, or beliefs that no longer serve and make room for growth and new intentions in the months to come. The concept of death and rebirth is that of personal change and regeneration as well, not confined to nature alone. The theme of death and rebirth in the lore of Samhain. The cycle of life and death and rebirth occurs throughout the mythology and spiritual practice of the Celts, placing Samhain firmly at the center of the motion. In Celtic cosmology, it was not seen as something horrible, but rather a natural and ennobling part of life. The Celts believed in some form of afterlife known as the otherworld, in which souls would be at rest before being reborn onto the earth. The souls were believed to cross at Samhain, whether to return and visit the living or go on to their next life. This belief in the cyclical nature of existence can be seen in many of the Samhain myths. Perhaps most well known is that of Don, god of the dead, who presided over the Celtic underworld. According to tradition, Don would gather the spirits of the dead at Samhain and lead them to the afterlife. Association with death and the underworld brought Don into Samhain rituals, where offerings were made to him for safe passage of the spirits of the dead. Large roles in Samhain lore are also played by the Morrigan, a powerful goddess of war, fate, and death. As a goddess of foretelling and causing death, the Morrigan was appeased during Samhain, making sure that the spirits of the dead were well guarded and these souls would cross safely into the otherworld. Since she had relations both with life and death, she was very important in the celebrations of Samhain, whose blessings would successfully facilitate passage between the worlds. The role of divination at Samhain. Divination had always held a prime position in the Samhain rituals. The veil between worlds, now at its thinnest, meant that on Samhain, a message from beyond the veil or the spirit world could be received as never before. To communicate with the spirits and get a hint of the future, ancient Celts would use several methods: scrying, casting lots, and interpreting omens. Other popular forms of divination during Samhain include the ever-popular bobbing for apples, which actually survived into the present day. Apples in the ancient Celtic practice were sanctified, and bobbing for them was not a game but a form Samhain, a deep dive into its history, significance, and legacy. Samhain is one festival that traces its roots back over 2,000 years and has very significant importance in both Celtic and pagan traditions. Its presence still echoes in contemporary culture through Halloween, but the spirit and substance of Samhain are much deeper than that shallow commercial feast. Falling between the end of harvest and the beginning of winter, this November 1st festival indeed falls between significant seasonal junctures, one steeped with practical and spiritual meaning for ancient peoples, from sundown on October 31st to sundown on November 1st. Samhain and the cycle of the year. To fully explain Samhain, it's necessary to set it into the context of the Wheel of the Year. The Celts had a nature-based calendar. Samhain was one of their 4 big seasonal festivals, the others being Imbolc on February 1st, Beltane on May 1st, and Lugnasad on August 1st. Being the last harvest festival of the year, Samhain represented the shutting up of the year and the beginning of a darker and colder half of the year. The Wheel of the Year is a metaphor for the cyclic rhythm of life and death, of sowing and reaping, and this dictated much of life in pre-Christian Europe. Samhain was the last feast before winter's chill and marked the final gathering of crops, at a time of preservation and preparation for the coming winter months. Animals that could not be kept during winter were slaughtered, thereby guaranteeing a stable source of nutrition through the next few months, and land was left barren until the next year's crop cycle began. Not simply a practical event, Samhain was viewed as a significant moment in the cosmic pattern of life, an instance during which the division between the sphere of the living and that of the dead became blurred. The spiritual and supernatural aspects of Samhain. The spiritual meaning of Samhain came from the idea that at this time of year, the veil between our world and the world of the dead was thin. It was believed in old Celtic times that during Samhain the dead might walk this earth much more freely than at other times, and as such it was both a time to honor loved ones who'd passed on and to guard against the possibly malevolent spirits. Traditions of ancestor veneration lay at the heart of Samhain. Food would be put out for the dead relatives in every family as they attempted to gain their favor or protection for the forthcoming winter months. At the same time, offerings and rituals were also made to bar more malignant spirits from inflicting harm. Fires and bonfires were often ignited during Samhain, as this was believed to defend against evil spirits and protect the community. Dumb suppers also took place, where meals were held in complete silence, setting an extra place at the table for the dead loved one. In the quiet and solemn meal, time was taken to reflect upon those who had passed, even give spiritual support through prayer or remembrance. To protect, different outfits were worn in order to confuse or frighten spirits. People would wear a disguise in hopes that spirits roaming the earth would think of them as a similar supernatural being and would leave them alone. The role of the gods in Samhain. In fact, it was rather the gods who had an important part to play in the way Samhain was observed. Celtic mythology is replete with deities and spirits associated with death, the afterlife, and seasonal turning. A number of key figures in Celtic mythology were venerated or feared on Samhain. One of them is the figure of Don, the Celtic god of the dead, sometimes referred to as the Lord of the Underworld. He was said to reside in Tech Duin, a sacred place to which the dead would gather to proceed further on their journey to the afterlife. Many of the rituals that took place on Samhain nights were performed in honor of Don for safe passage into the afterlife. Another strong god associated with Samhain is that of the Morrigan, a goddess of fate, battle, and death. She would often appear as a crow or raven and was seen as a guide to the dead or a harbinger of doom. Because of this, the Morrigan's association with battles and death made her a figure at the very center during Samhain, when the cycle of death and rebirth was on the mind of those celebrating bonfires, divination, and sacrifices. During Samhain, The fires lit amongst the communal gathering have been kept through tradition from the custom of ancient times, where communities would come together to light the main fire, sometimes on hilltops. Fire was symbolic for protection, renewal, and purification. Each family, after the community fire was lit, would take embers back home to rekindle the hearth fire at the house, which before the festival had been extinguished. These newly started fires were to bring the blessings of gods and protect the household through the winter months. Another sacrifice was given so the people in the community would last through winter. These sacrifices usually involved animals and crops so that gods would bless their community for the coming year. Other early accounts claim that the Celts performed human sacrifices during Samhain, though this is still debated among scholars. Another salient feature of Samhain was divination. Because the Celts believed the thinning of the veil between worlds made it easier to communicate with spirits and glean insight into the future, the people would engage in many varied forms of divination. Casting lots, reading the smoke and flames of the bonfire, or apple bobbing and other such games for the prediction of the future. Apples were a sacred fruit, mainly associated with immortality and the other world, and this fruit's use in divination was believed to link participants with the spirits or gods. Samhain and the Roman influence. When the Roman Empire conquered the Celts, the festival of Samhain became merged with Roman festivals, including Feralia, a festival to honor the dead, and Pomona, a festival in honor of the Roman goddess of fruits and seeds. Pomona's association with apples most likely accounts for the incorporation of apples into Samhain rituals, such as apple bobbing and other forms of fruit-related divination. However, despite the presence of Roman influence, Samhain retained much of its original pagan significance well into the medieval period. It was during the Christianization of Ireland and Britain that the character of the festival started to shift more radically, the Christianization of Samhain and the birth of Halloween. The spread of Christianity throughout Europe came with a systematic effort by the Church to absorb or suppress local pagan customs. Pope Gregory III moved All Saints' Day to November 1st in the 8th century in hopes it would supplant Samhain. It was followed by All Souls' Day on November 2nd, a day when people pray for the dead, a day which of course fit within the thematic elements of Samhain and its veneration of ancestors and the dead. The Church hoped to make these pagan customs Christian, but much of the old ways prevailed. Translated into Christian terms were the notions of spirits being out in the world, the ways of appeasing the dead. The late souls on the night before All Souls' Day would wander seeking prayers. These customs evolved into Halloween, especially after Irish and Scottish immigration brought these customs to the New World during the 19th century. Trick-or-treating has its origins in the earlier activity called souling, whereby children would go from door to door, offering to pray for the dead spirits in return for food. Similarly, the making of jack-o'-lanterns, originally carving out turnips, sprang from the Samhain custom of putting lanterns in windows to help guide spirits to their proper destination, or to fend off malevolent entities. The contemporary celebration of Samhain. Today, many neo-pagan and Wiccan groups still celebrate Samhain. It has become one of the most relevant Sabbats included within the Wheel of the Year, since it is the right time to perform spiritual reflection, ancestor worship, and magical practice. For modern pagans, the period of Samhain is believed to be a time when spiritual energy is high, hence appropriate for rituals dealing with transformation, protection, and divination. The other common practices include rituals to pay homage to the dead, such as the making of altars for ancestors, leaving food offerings, or performing certain rituals at cemeteries. Others hold silent suppers or meditate to reconnect with the spirit world, which will then give guidance for the coming year. But even as it has evolved in popular culture into Halloween, Samhain remains a deeply spiritual and cultural event, especially for those adhering to earth-based or pagan religions. It is a reminder of the cycles evident in life and death, and in reaching to the past to continue forward into the future. Conclusion. Of all the festivals, Samhain happens to be one of the most interesting and long-lasting, mainly because of its very rich history as a festival of death, transformation, and renewal. This, at best, has only deepened the cultural and spiritual roots that it possesses in its evolution to Halloween. While much of its original practice has been changed or lost over time, the central themes that it has always dealt with, honoring the dead, preparing for winter, and the life-death cycle prevalent within it remain core to its observance, both ancient and in modern pagan practice. Thank you for spending time with us through Spookscope today. Feel free to share your knowledge and wisdom in the comments section, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends and family. Until next time, my dear spooker, stay curious.